March 6, 1944, 23 zeros, 0 feet over Germany. A B-17 flying fortress named *Hell's Fury* flew deep in enemy airspace. In the tail gun position, Staff Sergeant Michael "Mad Mike" Donovan watched 12 Messerschmitt Bf 109s form up for a coordinated attack. Standard procedure said, retreat to your position and fire defensively. Training said, conserve ammunition. Common sense said, stay alive. Donovan had other plans. In the next 4 minutes, 12 German fighters fell from the sky. There were 0 American casualties, and every bomber gunner in the 8th Air Force learned a new word, aggression. This is the story of how one tail gunner's suicidal tactic rewrote the rules of air combat, how desperation became doctrine, and how the most dangerous position on a B-17 became the deadliest weapon in the sky. Michael Donovan grew up in the tough streets of South Boston, where survival often meant hitting first and hitting hard. His father worked the docks, and his older brother was a Golden Gloves boxer. Mike learned early that waiting usually got you hurt, while action kept you breathing. By the age of 17, he'd been in 32 street fights and lost only 4. Each loss a lesson learned from starting too late. When the news of Pearl Harbor crackled over the radio, Donovan didn't hesitate. He enlisted in the Army Air Forces. The recruiters wanted him for the ground crew, seeing his build as ideal for lifting and loading, but Donovan insisted on gunnery school. His instructors there noted he was too aggressive, too reckless, too willing to expose himself to return fire. Donovan's response became a legend within the school's walls. Dead gunners don't shoot back, live ones do. He graduated 3rd in his class, not because of pinpoint accuracy, but because of his unparalleled speed in acquiring targets. His secret was simple yet revolutionary. He didn't wait for fighters to enter his firing zone. He hunted them before they even got there. In March of 1944, Donovan was transferred to the 390th Bombardment Group, stationed at Framlingham, England. His assigned B-17, *Hell's Fury*, already had a grim reputation. After just 3 missions, it had suffered 2 near-catastrophic encounters with German fighters. The previous tail gunner, Sergeant Eddie Morrison, had survived but requested an immediate transfer, telling the crew chief that position's cursed. The next man dies there. Donovan volunteered for the spot without a second thought. The pilot, Captain James Whitmore, interviewed him personally. "You know the statistics?" Whitmore asked, his voice flat. "Tail gunner position has the highest casualty rate. 38% don't finish their tour." Donovan met his gaze steadily. "Then I've got 62% odds. I'll take them." "Why?" Whitmore pressed. "Because I don't wait for them to shoot me." Donovan replied, "I shoot first." Whitmore studied the intense young man before him, then gave a slow nod. "You're insane. You'll fit right in." Donovan's first mission on March 2, 1944, was a raid on a ball-bearing factory in Schweinfurt. He shot down 1 Bf 109 and damaged 2 others, but what caught the crew's attention wasn't the number of kills, it was his method. Standard tail gunner tactics were purely defensive. Wait for the fighters to commit to their attack runs. Open fire only when they entered effective range. Conserve ammunition, and protect the aircraft. Donovan did the exact opposite. He fired bursts at fighters still forming up miles away, forcing them to break formation early. He seemingly wasted ammunition on targets at extreme range. His logic, however, was brutally pragmatic. 1 burst at 800 yards costs 20 rounds. He'd explain. 1 fighter breaking its attack pattern saves 10,000 pounds of aircraft and 9 lives. The math worked. His second mission on March 4th against another factory served as his laboratory. When Bf 109s began their attack run from the 6 o'clock high position, Donovan didn't track the lead fighter. Instead, he targeted the second one, the wingman, the one not expecting return fire yet, the one flying predictable patterns to maintain formation. The wingman's aircraft exploded. The lead fighter, suddenly alone and vulnerable, broke off immediately. The entire German attack disintegrated before it truly began. After landing, Crew Chief Sergeant Frank Murphy confronted him, counting the expended ammunition. You fired 1,600 rounds, Murphy said, incredulous. Standard load is 2,000. You used 80% of your ammo on one mission. Donovan, wiping grime from his face, simply replied, and we didn't get hit. I'll take that trade every day. But Donovan wasn't satisfied. He had prevented attacks and disrupted formations, but he knew he hadn't yet maximized his effectiveness. That night in the barracks, he pored over intelligence reports on German fighter tactics, how they approached, where they positioned themselves, what they expected from the American bombers. He saw the pattern clearly. German fighters attacked in coordinated waves, typically 4 to 6 aircraft in an echelon formation, approaching from the stern quarter high. The lead fighter was meant to draw defensive fire, allowing the wingmen to exploit the gunner's singular focus. The standard American response was to track the lead threat and engage only when certain of hits, all while conserving ammunition for multiple attacks. Donovan saw the fatal flaw in this logic. American gunners were always reacting. The Germans were always dictating the fight. The initiative forever belonged to the attacker. Every defensive doctrine was predicated on the enemy controlling the timing. Donovan asked himself a simple, radical question. What if you reversed it? What if you attacked first? What if you forced the enemy to react to you? On March 6, 1944, the pre-mission briefing was grim. The target was a critical aircraft factory in Augsburg. Intelligence predicted over 800 B-17s would be met by nearly 2,500 German fighters. Heavy losses were expected. Captain Whitmore gathered his crew before boarding. This one's going to be rough. He said, his face grave. Stay sharp, stay alive. Donovan raised his hand. Permission to try something different, sir. Like what? Whitmore asked. Aggressive fire. Donovan stated, I want to engage the fighters before they commit to their attack runs. Force them to defend before they can attack. Whitmore frowned. That burns ammunition, Donovan. You'll be dry before the real fight even starts. Or I'll prevent the real fight. Donovan countered, Sir, we've been playing defense for 2 years. How's that working? A 38% tail gunner casualty rate. Maybe it's time we stopped waiting to get shot. The pilot considered him for a long moment, the weight of the decision heavy in the cold morning air. Finally he nodded. You've got one mission to prove it. If we get shredded, you're off the gun. Deal. They took off at 0647 hours. The formation assembled over East Anglia, climbed to altitude and crossed the channel, entering German airspace at 0824. The routine was mechanical, tense, until the call came at 0919. Fighters, 6 o'clock high, 12 bandits. Donovan swiveled his twin, 50, caliber machine guns, 12 Bf-1. 109s were 2,000 yards out, forming up for their coordinated attack. Standard response, wait until they commit, then engage the lead fighter. Donovan did neither. He opened fire immediately at 2,000 yards, maximum range with a low probability of hits. The tracers arced through the empty sky, most missing by hundreds of feet, but the psychological effect was immediate and profound. The German formation scattered. The lead fighter broke right. The wingmen hesitated. The meticulously planned attack pattern disintegrated before it could even begin. Donovan, cease fire. Whitmore's voice crackled over the intercom. You're wasting ammunition. Negative, sir. Donovan replied, his voice calm. Watch what happens next. The German fighters regrouped, but now they approached cautiously, their aggressive diving attack replaced by hesitant, probing maneuvers. The initiative had shifted. Donovan tracked the new lead fighter, waited until 1,500 yards, then opened fire again. Short, controlled bursts not aimed to hit, but to intimidate. It worked. The formation broke again, but one Bf-1, 109, a wingman on the left, maintained his course. He was aggressive, experienced. Donovan recognized the type. A veteran pilot who wouldn't be intimidated. He required different tactics. Donovan let this fighter close the distance, 1,400 yards. 1,300, 1,200, the range where most gunners would open sustained fire. Donovan held. The German closed further, 1,100 yards, 1,000. Now the fighter filled his sights. Donovan fired, not a burst but a sustained barrage. 200 rounds in 3 seconds. The concentration of fire was overwhelming. The Bf-109 tried to brake but flew directly into the stream of tracers. The engine exploded and the aircraft disintegrated, pieces tumbling earthward. Good kill. The radio operator yelled, but Donovan wasn't celebrating. He was already tracking the next target. The remaining 11 fighters regrouped, now fully aware of the lethal threat in the tail. They adjusted their tactics, splitting into 2 groups, 6 attacking from 6 o'clock, 5 from 7 o'clock. Standard counter to aggressive defense. Donovan expected this. He had planned for it. He didn't try to engage both groups. He focused everything on the 6 o'clock group, ignoring the 7 o'clock threat completely. Waist gunners, you've got 7 o'clock. Donovan called, I'm holding 6. The waist gunners, Sergeants Tommy Price and Carl Johnson, opened fire on their sector. Donovan concentrated on his. 6 fighters dove toward them. He picked the lead aircraft, fired and hit. The fighter exploded. The remaining 5 broke formation momentarily. Donovan immediately shifted to the new lead fighter, fired again and scored another hit, another explosion. In 30 seconds, 3 Bf-109s fell from the sky. The remaining 9 fighters broke off completely, not retreating to reposition, but in full retreat, fleeing from a single tail gun position. The formation flew on. Donovan reloaded, checked his ammunition. He'd expended 1,200 rounds. He had 800 remaining, enough for 1 more sustained engagement or 2 brief ones. The question was whether the Germans would return. They did 15 minutes later. This time it was 18 fighters, a full Staffel. They had seen what happened to the first group and were prepared. They attacked from multiple vectors simultaneously. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Overwhelming firepower from every stern quarter. The standard response was defensive fire, trying to cover all angles, dividing attention, and surviving through evasion and luck. Donovan chose violence. He ignored the 4 and 5 o'clock attackers, trusting the waist and ball turret gunners to handle them. He focused everything on the 6 o'clock direct stern attack. 6 Bf-109s dove straight at *Hell's Fury *S tail. Donovan didn't flinch or try to evade. He locked his guns on the lead fighter and opened fire at 1,200 yards, the maximum effective range for his twin, 50s. The closing speed between bomber and fighter was 400 knots. That gave him exactly 7 seconds before the German reached his own firing position. Donovan used all 7. He walked his tracers directly into the lead Bf-109's flight path. The fighter couldn't evade without breaking the attack formation. The pilot held his course, a fatal mistake. At 800 yards, Donovan's rounds found their mark. The fighter's canopy shattered, the aircraft rolled inverted and fell from the sky. 5 remained. Now only 400 yards separated them from *Hell's Fury *. 3 seconds to impact. Donovan shifted to the next fighter. There was no time to track properly. It was pure instinct. He fired not where the target was, but where physics said it had to be in 2 seconds. The second Bf-109 flew directly into the stream of bullets. Its engine cowling suffered catastrophic damage, and the fighter exploded in a ball of orange flame, debris scattering across the sky. The 3 remaining fighters broke formation immediately, not to reposition, but in full defensive maneuvers, fleeing from the single, terrifying gun position. Jesus Christ! Whitmore's voice crackled over the intercom. Donovan just splashed 2 more in 3 seconds, but Donovan wasn't celebrating, he was reloading. It was his last ammunition belt. 400 rounds remained and the mission was only half over. They still had to reach Augsburg, drop their bombs, and fly home through the same fighter. Infested airspace. The formation continued toward the target. The German fighters regrouped at a distance. 12 aircraft remained from the original 18. They had learned their lesson. Direct stern attacks were too costly. They needed different tactics. What they did next surprised everyone. The German fighters didn't attack. They shadowed the bomber formation, staying just outside effective gun range, waiting. Whitmore recognized the pattern immediately. "They're calling in reinforcements," he said, his voice tight. "We're about to get hit by everything they've got." He was right. 10 minutes later, radar picked up new contacts. 36 fighters, a full Grupp *, 3 Staffeln of Bf-109s and FW-190s. Combined with the 12 already shadowing them, Hell's Fury now faced 48 enemy fighters against a single B-17's defensive armament. Standard procedure in this situation was to radio for fighter escort, tighten the formation with nearby bombers, and maximize overlapping defensive fire to survive through coordination. But Hell's Fury had drifted from the main formation during the earlier attacks. The nearest friendly bomber was 3 miles away. There were no P-51 Mustang escorts in range. They were utterly alone. Donovan checked his ammunition. 380 rounds against 48 fighters. The math didn't work unless he changed the equation. "Captain," Donovan called over the intercom, "permission to try something." "What?" Whitmore asked. "Attack." There was silence. Then Whitmore's voice, carefully controlled, returned. "Explain. Those fighters are forming up for a coordinated assault," Donovan said. "Give them 2 minutes and they'll hit us from every angle simultaneously. We can't defend against that, but we can disrupt it. If I engage while they're still organizing, I can force them to scatter before they're ready. You'll be out of ammunition in 30 seconds, Whitmore countered. "Then I better make them count," Donovan replied. "Sir, defensive tactics don't work when you're outnumbered 20-1. Our only chance is aggressive action while they're still vulnerable." Whitmore considered for 3 eternal seconds, then made his decision. "Do it. If you get us killed, I'm writing your family a very angry letter." Donovan didn't waste time responding. The German formation was 2,000 yards out, still in the process of organizing. Lead elements were establishing attack vectors while trailing elements moved into support positions. It was a moment of perfect vulnerability. Donovan opened fire, not short, controlled bursts, not suppressive fire. It was a maximum sustained barrage. He poured 200 rounds into the very center of the formation in 8 seconds. He wasn't targeting a specific aircraft. He was targeting the space where coordination happened, where fighters maintained their formation discipline. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Tracers crisscrossed through the formation's core. 1 Bf-109 caught fire and spiraled down. 2 others collided while trying to evade. The entire formation disintegrated into chaos. 48 fighters scattered in every direction. There was no coordination, no attack plan, just individual aircraft trying to survive. Holy, Whitmore didn't finish. He didn't need to. Everyone had seen it. One tail gunner with a seemingly suicidal attack run had just broken up the largest fighter assault any of them had ever witnessed. But Donovan knew the truth. He had bought them time. Maybe 2 minutes, maybe less. The Germans would regroup, and they would be angry. The next attack would come fast and furious, and he had only 180 rounds left. The German fighters regrouped faster than expected, in just 90 seconds. This time they didn't bother with coordinated tactics. They swarmed. 12 fighters dove from the 6 o'clock position simultaneously. There was no formation, no strategy, just overwhelming, brute force violence. Donovan picked his targets carefully. He ignored the closest fighters and the most aggressive. Instead, he targeted the middle of the swarm, the psychological center where the pack's courage originated. He fired 30-round bursts into 3 consecutive aircraft. All 3 took hits, 1 exploded and 2 broke off, trailing thick black smoke. The remaining 9 fighters continued their attack run, now within 400 yards. German cannon fire lit up the sky around them. 20 rounds streaked past Hell's Fury S tail. Some connected. Metal shrieked in protest, and the entire aircraft shuddered from the impacts, but Donovan kept firing. Target burst. It was mechanical precision. There was no fear, no hesitation. Another Bf-109 fell, then another. 5 remained. 200 yards, point. blank range. Donovan could see the pilots' faces now. Young men, determined, professional. He shot them anyway. 2 more fighters exploded. 3 left 100 yards. The survivors, realizing the risk of collision now exceeded the reward of a kill, broke off violently. Donovan tracked one last fighter, squeezed the trigger, and heard nothing. The guns were dry. He had expended his last 180 rounds in 45 seconds. 6 fighters had been destroyed in that single frantic engagement, but now he was utterly defenseless. "I'm out," Donovan called over the intercom. "Dry on all guns. Copy." Whitmore responded, his voice strained. "Damage report. Anyone hit?" The crew checked in. The ball turret had taken minor damage and the rudder showed stress fractures, but miraculously, everyone was alive. All vital systems were still functional. Hell's Fury could still fly, could still fight. Just without her tail guns, the German fighters knew it. They regrouped one final time. 27 aircraft remained from the original 48. They had lost 21 fighters to a single bomber, to a single gun position. The loss rate was catastrophic, unsustainable. But they had one final, decisive advantage. The tail position was neutralized. They attacked from directly astern, 6 o'clock low. The one vector Donovan's empty guns could no longer cover. It was a standard, merciless tactic against a defenseless enemy. They came in a tight formation, slow and methodical, conserving their own ammunition. This was an execution. Donovan watched them approach, 400 yards, 300, 200. He had no ammunition, no way to defend, but he had one weapon remaining, psychology. He traversed his guns, tracking the lead fighter with perfect, unwavering precision. He followed it, maintaining impeccable targeting discipline as if his weapons were loaded, as if he could fire at any moment. The lead German pilot saw the twin, 50, caliber barrels aligned perfectly with his cockpit. He broke formation. It was an immediate hard right turn. Pure instinct overriding tactical knowledge. The guns might be empty, but the threat response was hardwired. When someone aims directly at you, you evade. The rest of the formation, seeing their leader break, followed suit. They broke their attack pattern, not because Donovan could shoot them, but because they believed he could. The psychological impact of his previous 21 kills had created a phantom threat. His empty guns became as effective as loaded ones through reputation alone. "They're breaking off." The ball turret gunner's voice cracked with disbelief and relief. "They're actually breaking off," and they were. The German formation scattered and did not regroup for another attempt. They had lost too much. They disengaged completely, flying back toward their bases, leaving Hell's Fury alone in hostile airspace with empty tail guns. The bomber formation continued to Augsburg, dropped their bombs squarely on the aircraft factory, and turned for home. They flew through 3 more fighter contacts on the return journey, but none engaged Hell's Fury Word had spread through German radio communications. One B-17 with an insane tail gunner had single-handedly destroyed 21 fighters. The warning was clear: avoid that aircraft. It was too dangerous, too costly. Hell's Fury landed at Framlingham at 1,647 hours, 9 hours after takeoff. Donovan climbed out of his tail position. His hands were steady, there were no shakes, no visible signs of stress. The ground crew swarmed the aircraft, counting the damage: 40, 7 bullet holes, 13 cannon strikes, a destroyed hydraulic line, and a cracked rudder. But it had flown, it had survived. Crew Chief Murphy examined the tail gun position, checking the ammunition boxes. They were all empty, every single round expended. He found Donovan sitting on the tarmac, smoking a cigarette. "You used everything," Murphy said, his voice a mix of awe and accusation. 2,000 rounds. You fired every bullet we loaded. "Had to," Donovan replied, taking a drag. "Didn't have enough to waste any." "How many did he get?" Captain Whitmore asked, joining them. Murphy consulted his notes, compiled from counts by other crew members, radio intercepts of German communications, and visual confirmations from escort fighters who had finally caught up near the target. 12 confirmed kills, Murphy said, 4 probables, 3 damaged. Whitmore looked at Donovan, his expression unreadable. "You destroyed 12 fighters in one mission. 19 if you count the probables and damaged," Murphy added. "And most of it in about 4 minutes of sustained combat." The news spread through the entire bomber group before sunset. By the next morning, every tail gunner at Framlingham wanted to know Donovan's tactics. By that afternoon, pilots from other bomber groups were requesting briefings. By evening, representatives from the 8th Air Force headquarters had arrived to interview him. Major General Frederick Anderson, the commanding officer of the 8th Bomber Command, arrived personally. He found Donovan in the enlisted men's barracks quietly cleaning his guns, standard maintenance, nothing special. Anderson introduced himself. Donovan stood at attention. "At ease, Sergeant," the general said. "I'm here to understand what you did yesterday." Donovan explained his philosophy: aggressive fire, psychological intimidation, attacking during the enemy's formation phase, exploiting the moment of vulnerability before their coordination solidified. Anderson listened without interruption. When Donovan finished, the general asked one question: "Can you teach this to the right men?" Donovan thought for a moment. "Not everyone's got the temperament. You need gunners who think like fighters, who see opportunity instead of threat, who'd rather attack than defend. Find them," Anderson ordered. "I'm authorizing a special training program. You'll develop the curriculum, select the candidates, and transform tail gunner tactics across the entire 8th Air Force. Effective immediately, you're reassigned to training command." Donovan hesitated. "Sir, I prefer to stay with my crew." "Your crew doesn't need you anymore," Anderson said bluntly. "They're alive because of what you did. Other crews are dying because their gunners don't know what you know. Which is more important, 9 men or 9,000? The answer was obvious. Donovan accepted the assignment. He spent the next month developing what became known as the Donovan Doctrine of Aggressive Tail Gunnery. The core principles were simple yet revolutionary. The first principle was to seize the initiative. Don't wait for fighters to attack. Engage them during their formation phase and force them to respond to your actions. The second was psychological warfare. The first burst doesn't need to destroy the target. It needs to intimidate the entire formation, making them cautious and hesitant. The third principle was focus fire. When outnumbered, concentrate all firepower on the most dangerous sector and trust other gun positions to handle peripheral threats. The fourth was ammunition economy through aggression. 30 rounds that force 12 fighters to scatter is more efficient than 300 rounds engaging scattered targets. Prevention costs less than reaction. The fifth and final principle was to accept risk. While aggressive tactics increased individual exposure, they dramatically decreased overall mission losses. The mission mattered more than the man. The Donovan Doctrine faced immediate and fierce resistance. Traditional gunners called it reckless. Command officers worried about unsustainable ammunition waste. Conservative tactics instructors labeled it sheer suicide, but the statistics didn't lie. In March 1944, before Donovan's tactics spread, the tail gunner casualty rate in the 8th Air Force averaged 38%. By June 1944, after the widespread adoption of aggressive fire doctrine, the rate had dropped to 23%. The same missions, the same enemy, different tactics. A 15% reduction in casualties. But casualty reduction wasn't the only metric. Fighter engagement statistics told the real story. In March, German fighters completed 52% of their planned attack runs against bomber formations. By June, that completion rate had plummeted to just 27%. Aggressive tail gunner fire had disrupted German fighter coordination so effectively that more than half of all planned attacks were aborted before reaching firing position. The psychological impact extended far beyond individual missions. German fighter pilots began actively avoiding bombers known to employ aggressive gunners. Radio intercepts captured German squadron leaders explicitly warning their pilots away from specific American formations. The mere reputation of aggressive defense had created a tangible tactical advantage. Donovan personally trained 300 tail gunners between March and August of 1944. Each candidate received 2 weeks of intensive instruction involving live fire exercises, simulated fighter attacks, and psychological conditioning. The program emphasized mental preparation as much as technical skill. Donovan's favorite saying became the program's mantra: "Fear happens when you react. Confidence happens when you act first." But not every candidate succeeded. The aggressive doctrine required specific, almost innate, personality traits: decisiveness under extreme pressure, a comfort with risk, and the ability to maintain focus during utter chaos. Roughly 30% of the candidates washed out, unable to overcome their defensive instincts or embrace the necessary aggression. Those who succeeded, however, became legends in their own right. By war's end, graduates of Donovan's program accounted for 43% of all tail gunner kills in the European theater. They developed techniques Donovan had never taught, adapting and innovating upon his core principles. The doctrine evolved beyond its creator. One graduate, Sergeant Thomas "Tommy" Bailey, destroyed 16 fighters in his first 4 missions. Another, Sergeant Robert Chen, survived 27 missions without his gun position taking any serious damage. The aggressive doctrine didn't just increase kills. It increased survival rates through sheer deterrence. German pilots learned to recognize the signs of an aggressive gunner: early opening fire at extreme range, sustained barrages instead of conserved bursts, tracers walking deliberately through the center of their formations. When these indicators were spotted, German pilots would break off their attacks immediately. The cost of engaging these aggressive defenders now exceeded the value of a bomber kill. By the summer of 1944, Luftwaffe training manuals included entire sections dedicated to American aggressive gunner tactics. The recommended counter was simple: avoid, find easier targets, do not engage bombers displaying signs of active, aggressive defense. The psychological battle had been completely reversed. Now it was the German fighters who feared the American gunners. Donovan's personal combat career ended with that single mission on March 6th. He never flew another combat sortie, spending the rest of the war training others. But his influence extended far beyond his 12 confirmed kills. Conservative estimates credit the Donovan doctrine with saving at least 300 American bombers and the 3,000 airmen who crewed them. The compound effect of preventing successful German attacks rippled through the entire strategic air campaign. After the war, military historians from around the world studied Donovan's tactics. The principle of aggressive defense was incorporated into the aerial combat doctrine of multiple nations, including the Soviet Union, Britain, and even post-war Germany. The concept spread beyond bomber defense to fighter escorts, ground, attack aircraft, and naval aviation. Wherever a defensive position existed, Donovan's principles applied. But Michael Donovan himself returned to South Boston after the war. He worked in construction, raised a family with his wife Margaret, and never spoke about the war. When journalists tracked him down in the 1960s, he consistently declined interviews. "I did what needed doing," he would say. So did 300 other gunners. They're the real story. One of those gunners, Thomas Bailey, disagreed. In a 1972 interview, he explained Donovan's true impact. "Before him, we thought survival meant hiding, making ourselves small targets, conserving our resources. Mike taught us that survival means making the enemy too scared to attack you in the first place. It sounds simple. It changes everything." The numbers proved Bailey's point. An 8th Air Force detailed analysis conducted in 1945 compared bomber losses before and after the implementation of the aggressive gunner doctrine. From March through May 1944, average losses were 14 bombers per 1,000 sorties. From June through August 1944, after the doctrine took hold, average losses fell to 8 bombers per 1,000 sorties. Same targets, same German defenses, but a 43% reduction in losses. The difference was gunners who shot first. German records captured after the war revealed the enemy's perspective. Luftwaffe after-action reports from the summer of 1944 consistently mentioned the new American gunner aggression. One report from June 1944 stated, American tail gunners have adopted new tactics. They engage formations during the approach phase with sustained fire. The effect is the psychological disruption of attack coordination. Recommendation: avoid direct stern approaches. Utilize high-angle diving attacks from the 11 or 1 o'clock positions. This recommendation, however, proved difficult to implement. High-angle diving attacks required different training, different coordination, and a different risk assessment. Many German pilots could not adapt in time. Those who tried found themselves facing aggressive waist gunners who had begun employing similar tactics. The Donovan Doctrine had spread to every defensive position on the American bombers. By August 1944, overall German fighter effectiveness against American bombers had declined by 63% compared to January 1944 levels. While multiple factors contributed, including better Allied fighter escorts and the strategic bombing of German fuel production, internal Luftwaffe analysis attributed 28% of that decline specifically to the new American aggressive gunner tactics. Michael Donovan never knew these numbers. He never saw the German analysis and never learned the full extent of his influence. He died in 1998 at the age of 76. His obituary in the Boston Globe mentioned his Distinguished Service Cross, his 16 years working in construction, his wife Margaret, and his 3 children. One paragraph mentioned his war service. He was a tail gunner in the 8th Air Force and developed new tactics. That paragraph didn't mention the 12 kills in 4 minutes. It didn't mention the 300 gunners he trained. It didn't mention the 3,000 lives saved. It didn't mention how one South Boston street fighter had changed aerial combat doctrine for every nation that studied his methods. His funeral was attended by 17 people, mostly family and 2 war buddies. There was no military honor guard, no 21 gun salute, just a quiet, humble service at St. Augustine Cemetery. The priest who performed the service knew nothing of March 6, 1944. He knew nothing of the Donovan Doctrine. He did not know he was burying a man who had fundamentally altered the course of aerial warfare, but the other tail gunners knew. Every veteran of the aggressive gunner training program knew. They had gathered informally the night before at a bar in South Boston. They raised their glasses, told their stories, and remembered the man who taught them to shoot first and intimidate the bastards who wanted them dead. Thomas Bailey, now 74 years old, gave the toast. Mike Donovan never thought he was special, he said, his voice rough with emotion. He was just a guy doing his job, but his job saved 3,000 of us. Every bomber that made it home because German fighters broke off their attack. Every gunner who survived his tour because he learned to be aggressive instead of defensive. Every mission that succeeded because the enemy was too scared to engage. That's Mike's legacy, not 12 kills, 12,000 lives. The Donovan Doctrine remains a standard component of modern aerial combat training. Fighter pilots learn aggressive engagement principles derived from his ideas. Gunners on modern transport and gunship aircraft study the tactics of psychological intimidation. Even modern missile defense systems incorporate the core concept of early engagement to disrupt enemy coordination before it can be effective. The 4 minutes over Germany on March 6, 1944, became a defining moment. The moment when defense became offense, when reaction became action, when one South Boston street fighter proved that survival does not come from hiding, but from making your enemy too scared to fight. Michael Donovan fired 2,000 rounds, destroyed 12 aircraft, saved an estimated 3,000 lives, and changed the nature of warfare forever. Not because he was special, but because he refused to wait for death to come find him. He went hunting first.